Hello everyone. People have expressed interest in some of my recipes I've posted before, so I thought I'd teach the world how to make southern cornbread. Get to what that means in just a moment. First step though, I'm gonna take this cold, well-seasoned, large cast iron skillet. I'm gonna put it in the oven, and I'm gonna turn the oven on to 400 degrees to preheat while we do the rest of the stuff. When that oven comes up to temperature, that pan will be very, very hot, which is what we want. We'll get to why later. So, southern cornbread. There are two main schools of southern cornbread. There is the savory and there is the sweet. And people love to argue about that. For what I'm doing today, it's a savory, and you can add jalapenos to it. You can add all kinds of pork products to it if you're so inclined, including chitlins. We're not going to do that. We're going to do a very basic but delicious buttermilk savory cornbread. And I am starting with 3 cups of Martha White self-rising cornmeal mix. That's flour, cornmeal, a little bit of salt, some baking soda. And to get the texture that I like, I add another 2 pinches of baking soda. So 3 cups of cornmeal mix, 2 pinches extra baking soda. If you like a denser cornbread, you don't have to add the extra. And to that, I'm going to add 2 beaten eggs. Now, these eggs I got from a farmer. They are non-pasteurized, non-refrigerated. They're beautiful eggs. I wash them before cracking them because they are, real. And a tip, which I meant to show in this, but I did not, just in case there are any bits of chicken in those eggs, which can be a surprise with farm fresh eggs sometimes. I thought they make for a pretty gross video. I cracked them on the plate. After washing the shells, crack them on the plate, then open them up in the bowl. That way, you're not cracking the shell on a hard edge. It's not going to drive little bits of shell into the inside. So, we're not making a souffle, so I'm just going to use a fork to beat the 2 eggs. And we're not making a fancy pastry or anything, so I'm not going to weigh the actual cornmeal or anything. This is just cornbreads, what people just make for dinner all the time around here. So 3 cups is as accurate as you need to be. 2 beautiful beaten eggs. These are fairly large, but not extra large. If you have smaller eggs, you can use 3. Just put that in there, and I'm going to mix that all up. If I were doing a non-self-rising cornmeal mix, I would have had different dry ingredients for this, and I would have pre-mixed all the dry before adding any liquid, even just the eggs. But since I was just adding a little bit more baking soda to this, it really didn't matter about pre-mixing too much. So I'm just moving the eggs around a little bit. And here's where some of you are going to have problems because I don't have an accurate measurement for this. I'm using Hungarian-style cultured buttermilk, non-low fat. And the buttermilk will make this stuff rise really well, and it will give a great flavor. And I'm just going to add a whole bunch until I get the right consistency. And the consistency for cornbread is going to be an awful lot like the consistency that you want for pancakes. Just kind of soupy, not fully liquid, but not dry. So I can always add more. You can't take it away. So I'm just going to sneak up on it, and then I'll tell you how much is left in this bottle, which holds 1 quart. We're not going to use the full quart for this. And you don't want it to be overmixed or too smooth. You want it to be a little bit rough. It'll do its own thing. And there's one ingredient we've yet to add. We'll get to that. That's pretty crucial. A lot of recipes would have you add, at this point, they just have you add vegetable oil. But we're going to do this so it tastes really good instead of just putting some vegetable oil in it. So we're getting there. Still a little dry, but you really want to sneak up on it. Like I said, you can always add more. You can't take it away. I think that ought to do it. Once I get that incorporated, and normally I would use a nice wooden spoon for this. It's a little bit stiffer, but that is being used for something else. So this standard boring one works just fine. Just incorporating it. I want to make sure I don't have any dry bits sticking to the bottom of this mixing bowl. And this can just sit a little bit while the oven comes up to temperature. And it will get a little bit thicker as all the flour and cornmeal starts to absorb a little bit of that liquid. But that's about the texture you want, just about pancake batter, where it moves around but still sticks to itself. I did not add any salt to this. There was some already in the cornmeal mix, and I'll get to where the salt is coming from in just a moment. Out of this bottle, this 1 quart bottle, I use about half a quart. And it's going to depend, like I said, I didn't weigh this. It's going to depend on how much cornmeal is in your cup and what the humidity is. As long as it looks like that, you're good. Let me let the oven warm up and then we'll get back to it. All right, now you're going to be witness to one of the great tragedies of my life. This house has an electric stove, which I do battle with all the time. A real gas stove, like a cook should have, is in my plans. But I'm going to get this cast iron skillet out of the 400-degree oven. It is nuclear hot. I'm going to take a stick of salted butter. So there's the missing salt and the missing fat that we're going to add to the cornbread. And I'm going to melt it in this skillet. And I'm going to probably put it back in the oven for a little bit so it'll melt a little bit faster. And I want it to just begin to brown. And then once it's all melted, I'm going to make sure that it's coating all the surfaces of the pan. And then we will resume. All right, the butter is almost ready. You can see that this is swollen up as it's absorbed liquid and as all the rising agents begin to do their work. That buttermilk and that baking soda are doing wonderful chemical things. And we've got the melted butter. It's just beginning to brown a little bit. And I want to very carefully work it around the edge so that every little bit of the surface has got butter on it. It's a little bit tricky to do on a pan this size with a tiny little hot oven mitt like I've got here. If you're uncomfortable about this, you can do it over the sink, or you can get a brush, but this does the trick as long as you're careful and you're not scared of it. You got to respect it but not be scared of it. Those that know, know. All right, you can see all the little solid bits and the clear bits. I want that to brown just a little bit more before I put it in. The brown butter flavor is our friend for this. Won't take much longer. Okay, it may be hard to see here, but it's got just a hint of a golden brown to it. Don't want to go any farther. This is really hot, as you will hear once I pour this mixture into here. Maybe you won't hear it. Sometimes it sizzles an awful lot. I want to get pretty much all this in here. You want to work kind of fast at this point. You don't want the pan to lose too much heat when you add the colder ingredients to it. Notice that it's all bubbled up on the side. You want to kind of gently swirl it because it's a very hot pan with very hot butter, and you want it fairly evenly distributed throughout. Just kind of give it swirls like this. It looks like an unholy hell, a terrible mess at this point. It's going to be great. Then I just kind of smooth it all out like so. And this will do wondrous things in the oven. So back in the 400-degree oven it goes. Middle to lower middle of the oven, in my experience. And it's going to bake for about 40 to 55 minutes, depending on the oven and the humidity and all kinds of stuff. So we're going to keep an eye on it, and you'll see what it looks like when it comes out. All right, exactly 42 minutes later, it looks like this. It's got this lovely dark brown crust around the edge. It's pulling off the sides of the pan. It has this nice dark texture, dark color on top. I've tried very hard to get this accurately reflected in the camera, and I'm going to let this sit a few minutes because it's very, very hot, and then I'm going to invert it, and you'll see the magic which awaits us. When I was a kid, this was always just served right out of the skillet. Just take slices and it lifts right up. But because I want this whole thing to go stale, dry out a little bit, I'm going to invert it on this large cutting board. And only lost a little bit, which is normally not something that happens, but someone used my seasoned skillet for something else, and I was hoping it would not be an issue for this. Turned out to be a little bit of an issue, as you can tell. So I'm going to have to re-season this skillet at some point. But this is more or less what you expect. This lovely golden texture. You can see how spongy and aerated that comes out. Let me get that last bit of goodness because that all tastes good. Usually it comes out perfectly because I'm videoing it and someone used my skillet without my authorization. I think it was one of the kids, so odds are I'll forgive them. It didn't come out perfectly, but most of it did. And really nice crunch here on the edge, really nice darkening here. I'm going to cover this with a towel so the pieces for dinner stay warm for tonight's meal. And then I'll take the towel off once I'm ready for it to dry out. And I will clean the skillet later with kosher salt and really get it all cleaned out and scoured down with salt and then re-season it. That might be a separate video, but I'm sure there's others on that. Oh, people ask about what kosher salt is. Kosher salt is what most cooks reach for if they're not doing, pastries or fancy things with chemistry involved in baking. But for cleaning a skillet, it's perfect because it's very coarse. For getting a good sear on a steak, it's invaluable. It's very coarse. It has nothing in it but salt. It has a different flavor than sea salt. It costs a lot less than sea salt. And it has a lower salinity than most other salts. There are two main brands that cooks use. The Morton, which is what I use because I can get it here, and the Crystal Diamond. The Crystal Diamond is also quite good. It's a little less coarse. They're not interchangeable in recipes. If something calls for X amount of kosher salt, you want to use less of the Crystal Diamond. But if you want to sear a steak, you want to season a stew. It has a nice mouth texture. It has a nice crunch to it on a sear. It has a great flavor, and it's easier to sneak up on the right level of salinity. Iodized salt, table salt, can be too salty, but it has its role both in fine baking or just like seasoning some pasta water. Anyway, that's kosher salt, and I use it all the time. So this is my plate. Nikki's going to have the same thing in smaller portions because she's my better third. This is just Sunday night comfort food, nothing big, no big deal. Got some ham steaks, fried them up in butter with some black pepper, made some rice, got some good Trappy's canned black-eyed peas, kicked them up with some pepper and red pepper flakes. Got the cornbread with some fresh butter on it. Usually we do a lot of veggies. Traditionally with this, I would have served turnip greens. My Indiana wife doesn't like them, so I didn't bother to do that. We'll have vegetables again tomorrow. Tonight's just comfort food. If this looks good to you, you're right. If not, you just haven't lived.
I love you. That looks so good.
I love you too.